Who is drawn by the Father?
The people in the Old Testament who lived prior and during the incarnation of Jesus, of course.
Well, that seems simple enough.
Those who are given by the Father to the Son, and then, here's the assertion being made, it's Roman Catholic, as well as anyone who was drawn by the Father and was not given by the Father to the Son. So this evidently is where I have gone wrong.
But how you gonna lie like that? How you gonna lie like that?
Is in not recognizing this this deep truth that there are multiple categories, and that because what I have said is that Jesus is responding to unbelievers. You have seen me, yet you've not believed. You are unbelievers. That's what you get. That introduces all the Father gives me will come to me. The one coming to me, I will never cast out. Why? Because I've come down of heaven to do my Father's will, not my own will. My Father's will is all he gives me. I lose none of it, raise it up on the last day. They start grumbling. Jesus' response is, don't grumble amongst yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. So the drawing of the Father is absolutely necessary for anyone to come to Christ. And everyone thusly drawn is raised up on the last day. That's what Jesus said.
Your point being what, Junior?
No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day.
And your point is?
And the consistency of this teaching, because you already had the consistency in 637. There's a specific people that are given by the Father to the Son. Jesus saves them infallibly. That means he has to have the power to do so. It's not a synergistic thing.
Whoa! Whoa! Hold your horses!
The early church didn't seem to think that synergism wasn't involved in it. All you have to do is look up a few of their commentaries. 2nd century Christian Tertullian, in his book Against Praxis, chapter 24, writes about John 6:44, just like you did. But the problem is, your interpretation is completely missing from his exegesis of it. Or John Chrysostom. If you look at his homily on the Gospel, number 46, he argues against your interpretation and tells us where it comes from, which is Manichaeans. And there are other exegesis you can find from other fathers on this. But regardless, Dr. White, the early church doesn't agree with your sentiments.
Then it continues in verse 45. It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught of God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Everyone.
Again.
What's your point?
The point is...
So, to even assert this idea that as well as anyone who was drawn by the Father and was not given by the Father to the Son. There is no category anywhere in John chapter 6 of this. Nowhere.
I'm not sure what article you're refuting. I mean, especially since you didn't leave a link of it in the description box. But again...
So what?
The verse simply addresses the people who learned from the Father prior to the incarnation of Jesus. As verse 45, what you just quoted shows. And there's another passage that demonstrates this even more. In Hebrews 1:1 through 2, it talks about how we are no longer drawn to God through the prophets. We are drawn to God through the Son. So as a result, John 6:44 cannot be talking about people in the past, present, and future. It can only be talking about people during and prior to the incarnation who learned from the Father.
This is derived from trying to substantiate some type of other theological system, whatever else it might be. If you just go through John,
then your view just gets completely obliterated just by looking at all the context of it.
They're unbelievers, not given by the Father to the Son, and that's why they don't come to the Son, because they don't have the ability in and of themselves to come to the Son.
So you're just going to ignore all of the context from John 10, Hebrews 1, and Isaiah 54:13, and John 6 as a whole, you're just going to ignore all of that and assume that the reason is total depravity and say that Scripture's reason is not good enough for you?
Funny. You should be ashamed of yourself. It's funny. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself.
But those who are drawn by the Father are the same ones who were given by the Father to the Son, because Jesus saves those given to him up in 6:37-39 perfectly, and 44 raises them up on the last day to eternal life. Same thing, same group. The normal attempted way around this is for someone to drive a wedge into verse 44 and say, okay, no one come to me unless the Father sent me draws him. Wedge, insert human autonomy, and the whole assumption, and if you're drawn, then you have the choice to believe, and if you believe, therefore, I will raise him up on the last day.
That's the best you can do?
Is for someone to drive a wedge into verse 44 and say, okay, no one come to me unless the Father sent me draws him. Wedge, insert human autonomy.
Come on, man, that's way too easy.
This video is getting boring. We don't have to assume human autonomy. Literally, all you have to do is just read verse 45, go back to Isaiah 54:13, and read Hebrews 1, and you can see that you don't have to drive a wedge to do that. But of course, you don't actually care to answer scholarly arguments, Dr. White. You would rather believe Calvinism is true because you stand to lose a lot if it's false. After all the books and stuff you've written on it, all the lectures you've given, all the debates you've had on it, if you admit Calvinism is false, you've got a lot to lose. But last I checked, pride is a dangerous sin, Dr. White. And this is precisely why I stopped being your fan.